So class, here's part 2 of this video. Now we want to talk about how to read input from an input file, read data from an input file. So we have been reading all our data from the keyboard, which is CN, but we want to understand how to read that from a file. Now, when you are creating an output file, you are totally in control. And so you don't have to have any information ahead of time about how to do things. But when you are reading an input file, you must know what information is in that file and what format it's in order for you to know how to read it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go back to the same program that we did. I'm going to change this to numbers. I'm just going to create a file called numbers.txt, and I'm just going to create a file that has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 in it because we need a file, and you don't have to use a program to create it. I could actually just go straight to Notepad and create my own input file. However, this way I know that it will be located in the right place. We'll talk more about that on Tuesday, about being sure about where your file is. So this is, again, I've got my include f stream. I'm creating an OF stream object called outFile. I decide to call this file numbers.txt, and I just have a for loop that's generating the numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, one on each line, and then I close the file. So let's run this. Nothing happens there. And you'll see here numbers.txt just showed up. So if I click on that, that's the data that is in the file numbers.txt, right? So if you're going to follow this example, you first of all need to make sure that you have this file. All right, I am now going to comment out this entire thing because now we are going to write the program to read this file. So we want to read data from a file, a sequential file. Right, we still have step 1, we still have to include f stream. I need my step 2, create an input file object. And so the data type of this one is IF stream, and I'm going to call it in file. So you have to be very mindful of what it is that you are doing. All right, step 3, that was step 2. This is step 3. We need to associate in file with an actual file. So we say infile.open, and the name of my file is numbers.txt, right? Again, and that file has to exist in your directory where your CPP file is. And so right here I can see numbers.txt, and if I click on it, that's the data that's in that file, right? Now, since that's the data that's in the file, in order to read this data, I have to know what's in it because I have to receive that information into variables, right? When you use CN to read something, you have to read it into a variable, and so we have to have a variable of the correct data type. So since these are all numbers, I'm going to make an integer variable just called num here, right? We'll come back to that in a second. Now, when it's an input file, I kind of need, I guess I'll call this step 3a. We need to make sure file exists and it's in the right place, because if it's not, then I won't be able to read anything from it. This is not necessary for an output file because if the file doesn't exist, it will be created. So if infile.isOpen, isOpen is a function that will return true if it was successful in opening this file, it returns false if it isn't. And so I'm going to say if not in file is open, that means file was not found. I always like to test for bad first, right? Else, then I'm going to see out process file here. We'll come back to that in a second. First, we need to make sure that we can do it. And remember, we'll come back to step 4. So step 5 is always going to be to close the file. And you only need to close the file if you successfully opened it. And so that's why this is here. So again, and all of this code is in this code example that's posted for you as well. All right, to review this, so I have a file. I need to make sure it exists. If so, if it doesn't, right? So this is also like saying infile.isOpen equals false. If it's equal to false, then it couldn't open the file, and we can't do anything else. Otherwise, you see big else here? That's very important. I'm going to process the file here, and I'm going to close the file. All right, so all I'm doing right now, before you get excited about doing file stuff, you have to make sure your file is in the right place. So look, I get process file here. That means it was successfully able to open this file. Let me change this up a second to show you what the problem can be. So I'm going to change the name of this file. I just renamed it, right? I have it called numbers1 now. So if I run this same program that's trying to find numbers, then I get, wait, first I have to close this. Right? I get file not found because it was looking for a file called numbers, and I renamed it to numbers1. Some of the most common problems that you're going to have can be just because the file is not in the right place. And so you have to make sure. So let me just run this again. Let's make sure. I renamed it back to numbers. Let's make sure it was able to read the file. And so yes, it says process file here, right? So if I want to, step 4, read some data. So the same way cin goes this way into a variable, then we are going to say read from in file into a variable. Let's call it num, right? If I want to make sure this works, echo it back to see what was read. Now this may not be a part of your normal program, but this is a really important debugging step. So let's see what we get now. All right, so process file here, num is 2. Is that the first number in my file? Yes. So it read a number, it read 2, right? I'm going to do one more and then I'm going to stop this video and we are going to do a third video to kind of wrap this up. Since I know there's a second line, I'm going to just do it again and see if I can read the second number as well. When it comes to input files, you have to go slow and just make sure that everything is connecting, right? So I read the first number was 2, the second number was 4. So we are able to successfully read that file. What were the steps? We created an input file object. The data type is ifstream. I associated that with an actual file. I needed to make sure the file exists. So we check using isOpen. And if it does, then this is where I'm going to process this. So I can take this out now. And if I want to read data, instead of going from cin, I'm reading from infile, and I have to put it into a variable of the correct data type based on what the information is in the file. right? So make sure that you can do this program. We're going to add one more thing to it in a third video.